Police even took to the airwaves, featuring the case on the popular American television show Unsolved Mysteries. O'Neill annoyed Kellerstein and the rest of the Annihilators by showing up at his Abilene farmhouse and their St. Thomas clubhouse while on the lam, running the risk of drawing a firestorm of police heat. In January 1992, the hunt for O'Neill ended at a shallow grave in a cornfield near Kellerstein's farm. The body had several bullet holes in the head, and Michael Simmons, the younger brother of local Outlaws president Andrew Teach Simmons, had no doubt, although he didn't witness the murder himself, that O'Neill had been killed for bringing unwanted attention to the Annihilators. He wouldn't stay put, Michael Simmons later said in an interview, so they put him on ice. Kellerstein might have felt lucky the Outlaws didn't treat him the same way. Shortly after O'Neill's murder, Kellerstein and 3 other Annihilator members began wearing new patches on their leather club vests with a lightning bolt SS design, indicating that they were underworld killers. Word drifted through the area that it was Wiener Kellerstein who had directed police to O'Neill's body and that his reward was a pass on some outstanding charges. The rumors may have been false, but they were effective nonetheless. For his part, Wiener Kellerstein basked in the belief that he was a bona fide underworld killer who had risen above the law. When writing to fellow bikers, Wiener Kellerstein now proudly signed his name, Your Brother Always, Wiener 1%er SS. Still, it would be naive to blindly accept Kellerstein's claim to have executed a wayward biker when so little of what he said was remotely credible. While Boxer was as honest as a child, Kellerstein couldn't seem to stop himself from lying. One of his favorite confabulations was that he had served in the Canadian military in a unit that had since been disgraced, an unmistakable hint that he had belonged to the once elite Canadian Airborne Regiment that had been disbanded for cruelty to civilians in Somalia. In reality, he had never been a member of that unit or any other. Kellerstein also liked to boast that he was descended from the line of Hessian mercenaries who fought alongside the British in the American Revolutionary War. Perhaps that explained the British flag in his home. It was a romantic notion for Kellerstein to think that he was descended from fearless fighting stock, though the Hessians weren't so much soldiers for hire as debtors and petty criminals pressed into action for nothing but food, and the only ones left behind in North America after the Revolutionary War were those the Germans didn't want back. Kellerstein also held himself out to be a proud Nazi, and the fact that thousands of members of the Canadian forces died fighting the Nazis apparently didn't register on him. It was the willingness to kill, not the cause, that mattered most. Kellerstein's unpredictable violence was fueled by a fierce paranoia. He could make people laugh, but there were some things Wiener took very seriously, even if those who knew him did not. There was something fun and exciting about having to wait at his locked gate on Aberdeen line until you were buzzed in through the intercom when it was working, as a video camera recorded everything on those days when it was working. It was as if visitors must be going to see someone important. Who would think he'd be famous or infamous one day, one guest later asked. Motion detecting cameras and alarms were installed to ward off sneak attackers. Once, when bikers were snorting cocaine with straws and playing pool, Kellerstein came flying down the stairs in an Arctic combat suit, armed with an Uzi submachine gun. A motion detector had been set off, and Kellerstein braced himself for an attack, possibly from police. He ordered someone to start a fire to the fireplace so that cocaine could be destroyed. "Fuck that. Just hand out the straws," one of the bikers shouted, refusing to burn the stash. Moments later, Kellerstein returned from the cold to report that the motion detector had been set off by a frost buildup on its electronic eyes, and the party continued. Another time, when entertaining company at the house, Kellerstein shot his then wife Linda in the back with an air pistol, just for a joke. He once pointed a .45 caliber pistol at informant Michael Simmons' big toe and asked for permission to blow it off. Simmons' reply was that he would prefer to be shot between the eyes, as he didn't like pain. It was apparently the right answer, as Kellerstein smiled, laughed, and lowered the handgun. In March 1992, in part as a result of Simmons' undercover work, police laid drug and weapons charges against Celestine and 14 others, including Simmons' older brother Andrew, called Teach because he had once been a substitute school teacher, president of the London chapter of the Outlaws. When police raided Celestine's farmhouse, they found him asleep on a couch with a loaded handgun within reach. Celestine had sold cocaine, pills, and a handgun to undercover police and eventually pleaded guilty to trafficking in narcotics, trafficking in the proceeds of crime, possession of a prohibited weapon, possession of an unregistered weapon, delivering a firearm to a person without a firearms acquisition permit, careless use of a firearm, and possession of property obtained by crime. For all of this, he was sentenced to 6 years in prison, his first federal prison stint at the age of 42. People became criminals for many reasons, some of them even worthy of sympathy. But Celestine was no victim to circumstance. On January 11, 1993, a prison psychologist reported that Celestine appeared altogether comfortable in his criminal lifestyle. Criminality appears to be a matter of choice of lifestyle, the psychologist reported, adding that the subject's responses drew a portrait of guardedness and evasiveness. Narcissists often feel persecuted, and Celestine certainly fit that pattern. A January 26, 1994 parole report reads, denies guilt, says he was set up and betrayed by others. A preliminary risk assessment done on that day argued against granting him unescorted temporary absences. Police described subject as a very violent person who uses intimidation to gain control of others. Describes him as a soldier of fortune. On May 6, 1994, Celestine was turned down for full parole. A prison report noted that he claims to own a construction company and security firm, but police report indicates these were not legitimate businesses and were fronts for criminal activity. Still, he was freed on parole later in 1994, and not long after that, the body of London resident Cynthia Cywink was found at the South Wold Earthworks, a National Historic Site about 5 kilometers from his farmhouse. Cywink's killer was never found, but there were persistent rumors that she had done something to annoy Wiener Celestine shortly before her murder. On April 27, 1998, his parole was revoked after London area police told corrections officers that he had been associating with known and active criminals. He told his parole officer that he would rather remain in prison than live back at his farm under the constant scrutiny of police. In a letter to him, the board noted, "You stated that you did not want another conditional release and your only interest at present is in the huge party to be thrown following your warrant expiry date." Once he was finally released, rumors started up again about unholy things happening around the property on Aberdeen Line. In December 1998, the body of 35-year-old millionaire Salvatore Sammy Vecchio was found by a trapper on a seldom-used dead-end road a few kilometers north of Iona Station in South Wold Township, in a swampy area on the banks of the Thames River, near where Cywink's body was discovered. Vecchio, a habit of bars and strip joints popular with local bikers, had been only half buried. His head was left sticking out of the ground and had been clubbed repeatedly, which suggested was an attempt to deliver a message to others. Exactly what the message meant or who was supposed to be receiving it was unclear, as Vecchio had a dizzying circle of tough friends in biker circles and the Hamilton mob. After all the clues were examined, police hadn't arrested anyone and still wondered if it was just a coincidence that his semi-burial took place virtually in the backyard of the area's most notorious outlaw biker. But not all rumors depicted Celestine as a remorseless tough guy. Bikers laughed as they recounted how he had been bitch-slapped by a husky woman in the London area roadhouse after he ordered her to remove a t-shirt that supported the Hells Angels. Instead of doffing and offending the t-shirt, the woman told him to fuck off. Celestine didn't back down, so she rained a volley of lefts and rights on him as he sputtered, "Stop it," repeatedly until others got in the middle and broke things up. It was around this time that Celestine first met up with Boxer Muscadet, fresh from his ugly divorce. Boxer never took to carrying a gun, even as his friend Celestine kept expanding his own personal arsenal and tally of victims. Boxer would have known that Celestine was a bit crazy and definitely violent, but he also talked frequently about brotherhood and loyalty. Boxer didn't have a criminal record and wasn't looking to become a big-time criminal or even a small-time one. He also didn't share Celestine's Nazi views, but he valued loyalty, especially to friends who called him brother. The party at the Woodbridge Clubhouse of the Loners Motorcycle Club on Rutherford Road at Highway 400 was in full swing on Wednesday, June 2nd, 1999, when a loud whooping sound could be heard from inside the farmhouse. The people celebrating were Wayne Celestine, Boxer Musketeer, and their friend, John J.J. Victor. The noise peaked and the three bikers burst outside, tossed their Annihilator's motorcycle club crest into a metal garbage can, and ignited them. The fire heralded the end of the Annihilators and the birth of the London area chapter of the Loners, with Celestine as its leader. To the Toronto area Loners, many of the newcomers seemed like little more than hayseed rowdies. The worst of the bunch was Celestine, with his shoulder-length gray hair and slightly unsettling nickname. Wiener was bestowed upon him because he apparently had a particularly large slab of manhood, or so Celestine told the story. The Toronto bikers simply took his word for it, as none of them was especially interested in seeing proof. While Wiener and his crew weren't particularly impressive catches, warm bodies were in demand as the Loners wanted to boost their numbers as a buffer against the westward push of the Hells Angels. The Angels were better organized than other Ontario clubs and far more aggressive. They sought nothing less than coast-to-coast presence in Canada. Smaller clubs like the Loners also had to grow or risk being swallowed up or swept aside altogether. In the face of the Hells Angels' advance, lowering their standards to include Wiener Celestine seemed like a worthwhile risk for the club. The Loners weren't the big time of the 1%er biker's life, but the club was certainly a step up from the small town Annihilators. They had Ontario chapters in Woodbridge, Richmond Hill, Toronto, London, and Windsor, as well as Italian chapters in Reggio Calabria, Messina, Brolo, Avellino, Isernia, Naples, and Salerno, and a Portuguese chapter in the Azores. They were small, but they were international, and Boxer, Wiener, and JJ were thrilled to join their ranks. Wiener Celestine celebrated with a party at his farm, at which a pig was roasted on a spit and bikers listened to live rock music. He was able to pull in more than 100 people, many of whom paid $20 for commemorative t-shirts that read Loners Rock and Pigfest 99 and depicted a grinning skull with two cross rapiers, a Confederate bandana, and a crumpled hillbilly cowboy hat. At the party, Celestine badly wanted to impress the Toronto area Loners with just how wild and dangerous he could be. Within minutes of meeting Glenn Ronway Atkinson, Celestine led him to a shed beside his weather-beaten barn and swung open the lid of a crate to reveal a cache of automatic weapons and handguns. Atkinson was annoyed rather than impressed. "That's a little foolish," he admonished. "You don't even know who I am, man." Atkinson hadn't really wanted to go to Celestine's party in the first place. He had just started seeing a new girlfriend, and the prospect of spending the afternoon with Celestine's crew instead wasn't something he relished. "I could be an undercover cop as far as you know," Atkinson continued. "You're my brother," Wiener Celestine replied, his feelings a little hurt. "I should be able to trust you." On the drive home, Atkinson turned to a friend and asked, "Can you believe the type of people we're attracting?" But in time, the greater Toronto area Loners came to see Celestine's good points. His farm was a good place to get bogus passports and fake First Nations status cards, although some Loners were annoyed by Celestine's never-ending barrage of advice. The Sherbrooke chapters of the Les Angels was caught up in the bloody biker war that consumed the energies of its Montreal and Quebec City chapters. While the other Quebec chapters bombed and shot and schemed, the Sherbrooke chapter quietly made overtures to expand its influence in Ontario. The Sherbrooke Hells Angels announced their presence in Wiener Celestine's neighborhood with the arrival of Big John Coates, a 6-foot, 7-inch, 300-pound gang associate. Coates' older brother Jimmy was a member of Celestine's Loners, and Big John wanted to pull Jimmy and his friends over to the Angels. Many of the younger Loners were all for patching over if they got the chance. But Celestine had everything to lose if Big John Coates succeeded, as there was virtually no chance that he could be offered an Angel's death head patch. Like the Outlaws, the Hells Angels took business seriously and weren't eager to admit heat scores. A patch over would leave Celestine a loner and more than just a name. But putting yourself in the way of the Hells Angels' plans is not without its risk. Tensions with the world's largest biker gang still simmered on October 22, 1999, the date of the wedding ceremony of Wayne Frederick J. Connor, the hefty president of the Loners Richmond Hill chapter. Boxer Musketeer and the rest of the London Loners were at the wedding party that evening when the celebration was interrupted by a buzz. "What's going on?" one of the guests asked. "Shootout," a biker replied. "One of our guys." A few hours before, as Wiener Celestine had turned onto Iona Road, a red Mustang pulled up alongside his 4x4. Celestine had been heading to Connor's wedding and might have recognized one of the men in the car that had approached him as Dave "Dirtbag Dirty" McLeish, a fellow loner and former member of his Annihilators Club. With McLeish was Phil Billy Gastonway, who was friendly with the Sherbrooke chapter of the Hells Angels but not a member. Within seconds, the windows of Celestine's white Chevrolet Blazer were shattered by bullets, but somehow Wiener sped away unscathed. Celestine had been in the Loners less than 4 months and already had attracted gunfire from the Angels. When police caught up with Big John Coates in Woodbridge, they searched his car and found an information package on various members of the Loners. Sûreté with Quebec biker expert Guy Outlet would later testify that Big John was in Ontario to murder some bikers there. Wiener Celestine's feelings of persecution and grandeur were even more pronounced now. He may have been paranoid, but it turned out that people really were out to get him. It was all the worse that one of his would-be killers was a former biker brother. Celestine was even edgier and more unpredictable now, but one constant in his life was Boxer Musketeer's loyalty. Certain things about Boxer were absolutes, including the fact that he would never betray a friend, even a crazy one. If that friend was like an extended family member, the bond was tighter still. Boxer also wouldn't abandon what he considered his responsibilities. Even as Boxer slipped deeper into the 1%er biker world, he kept his job at the Tilbury Brake Factory and fed his family with his paycheck, not crime. And although he was an outlaw biker with access to deadly weapons, Boxer still preferred to settle disputes with his fists like a man. His friend Wiener Celestine tried for a far different image when Boxer introduced him to his younger brother, Cecidio Joe. "I'm Wayne Celestine," Wiener announced. "I sell drugs and I kill people."